Hi, everyone. I'm Audrey. I'm your moderator. You're going to be getting a lot of follow-up information via email after. So we are here for you, and we're so glad you're here.
Couldn't have said that better, Audrey. My name is Dr. James. I've been working with diabetic patients for more than right about 15 years now. We've put more than 500 people through our program, more than 500 people through our program. And I can tell you that 100% of the time, we've actually been able to reverse diabetes or end diabetes altogether. So you don't have to believe me at this moment, but as we move along, I hope that this is going to make sense for you. And I think at the end of the day, what I hope for people is that they actually have hope. Like, because so far I've read some of the Facebook things that came in, prior to our talk today, and I could see that people are angry. People were saying things like, "My doctor said that once you're diabetic, you're always diabetic, and you'll never not be a diabetic." That's just not true. It's only true in the mode that you're in right now. You're in what's called the drug therapy model, and that drug therapy model is where you see your doctor, you get diagnosed, and then the doctor give you drugs. And most of you have started out with metformin, and then you went to a G drug, and then you went into insulin if you got there yet. If you haven't gotten there yet, thank God, but you're still not good. I wrote a book called The Solution of Type 2 Diabetes. So the truth is, even though you heard that it's not possible to beat diabetes, let me tell you, first and foremost, it is very possible. It's not only possible, we've done it more than 500 times already. And when I go over some of the things that we're going to go over today, make sure you have a pen or pencil available, because for sure you're going to be wanting to write down a lot of things that you haven't heard before. We're going to dispute a lot of things probably that your doctors have already told you that it can't be done. It can be done. And most of you, I think when we talk about it, most people kind of have an idea that there has to be another way. It can't be that we cannot beat diabetes. That's not possible. It is possible, and we do it all the time. So this should be exciting for you. You've probably seen some of the commercials on TV. They're on every single day about diabetes. Diabetes is rampant. It's not getting any better. It's actually getting worse. And all of you so far have gotten worse. Because some of you are saying right now, "Oh, I haven't gotten worse. I'm about the same as I was." Well, you're taking more medication now than you were when you were first diagnosed. So the reality is, if you're taking twice the dosage or 3 times the dosage or 3 different drugs now, most of you probably are doing that, then the reality is you have gotten worse because you having to take more drugs to try to control it. And keep in mind that when a doctor says, "Hey, we're going to control this with medication," if you're taking medication, it's not in control, it's out of control. That's an important thing for you to understand. So I was listening to one of the commercials just the other day. The actor's name is Anthony Anderson, if you can look him up. And what he said was, and these are all true facts, that if you have diabetes, you have 4 times the risk of stroke or heart attack and even death. And then he said at the end, "Is that too much?" Well, that's the point. And that is the point. They say that a person who has diabetes will lose 7 to 10 years on their life. So when that's going to matter? It's going to matter the day that you're dying, and then you're saying to yourself, "What if I didn't have diabetes? I wonder if I could have lived longer." But I'm going to tell you, you absolutely would have lived longer if you didn't have diabetes. Let me kind of just walk with you a little bit, take you through the process that you most likely went through in terms of how you were diagnosed. And at the end of the day, you're going to say, like, "How does he know that?" I know this stuff because, one, my mom and dad both are diabetics. My dad died in the year 2000 at 74 years old with complications of diabetes. And we're going to go over some of those complications as well. His complication was bilateral kidney failure. Some people aren't even familiar with the complications, but that's one of the complications, bilateral kidney failure. My dad was on dialysis 3 times a week, 3 hours at a time for 4 years, and then he died. It was miserable. His quality of life was zero. And if you could just imagine 3 times a week going to the hospital, it really doesn't get any worse, going to the dialysis center. So most people got diagnosed just arbitrarily. You went to the doctor because of a routine exam that you had to have, either because of an insurance issue or because of DOT physical or because you're 50 years old and they tell you when you're 50, you should go get a checkup. And you did that. And just like years before, you went in there, they took the blood test, they did the heart exam, they did everything they normally do. And then they sent you home. You didn't have any results yet because it's too early. And about a week or two later, the doctor's office calls you up on the phone and says to you, "Hey, Mr. Jones, the doctor went over, reviewed your test results, and we'd like for you to make an appointment to come into the office." And you did. And you think, like, okay, that's not unusual. And you may have even asked on the phone while you were on the phone with them, is everything okay? And the person who you talk to, who usually isn't the doctor, usually it's going to be the nurse practitioner or someone like that. And they say, "Oh, no, don't worry. We're just going to, we just want to make sure we go over a few things. The doctor just wants to talk to you in person about it. And so a couple weeks go by, you go in, you make that appointment, you go in and see the doctor. You're a little bit nervous, but the doctor walks in, has his pad in his hand, has a pen, an ink pen in his hand, and he's already writing down the name of a drug you're going to start taking today because the diagnosis that you are now a diabetic, a type 2 diabetic. And he says to you, Mr. Jones, just want you to know that you're a type 2 diabetic, as he's writing down the name of a drug you're going to take. Most of you know the name of that drug, starts with the letter M, and you're right, it's called metformin. And most of you have started out with metformin. If you start out with insulin first, you're worse than the person who starts out with metformin. He says you're a type 2 diabetic, and you said to him, are you sure? Because I don't have any complaints. I feel okay. And the doctor said, oh no, you're a type 2 diabetic. Your numbers are out of control. And I want you to write this down. If you, hopefully you got a pen and pencil, even though Audrey said she will send you all this in writing. Still not a bad idea to just kind of write it down for your memory, like she said. The actual numbers that should be like, when somebody talks about what are my sugar numbers every day, you should be taking your blood sugar every day. The range is 70 to 99. So when your doctor said it's 120 is okay, it's not okay. 120 isn't 120 anyways. And whatever number you have, if you're taking medication, it's not a real number because the number is only there based on the drugs that you're taking. So if you're taking 500 milligrams of metformin and your number dropped, you think you did something there, but you didn't, right? And then 3 months or 6 months go by, you go back and get checked again, and the doctor said your numbers aren't any better, so we're going to double the dosage. You went from 500 to 1,000 milligrams, but you just got worse. Your doctor, when you were diagnosed, he said, there's 3 things that I want you to do. Now that you're going to start taking metformin, 500 milligrams in the beginning, I also want you to eat right, exercise, and lose weight, he said. So those are things that you're going to try to do. You're going to take these medications in the meantime. We'll just keep checking you just to make sure, because, I'm your doctor. We just want to make sure you're doing okay. And the reality is 3, 4, 5 months go by, you get checked again, and your doctor says, well, I know we started out 500 milligrams of metformin, but your numbers aren't any better. Actually, they're a little bit worse than they were before, but don't worry, it's okay. We've got plenty of room. We're going to double the dosage, like I said earlier. And so now we went from 500 milligrams to 1,000 milligrams. So if you understand that, we could almost stop talking right now and not have a seminar at all, because then you realize that you really are worse. But most of you have gone a lot worse than that, because 3 or 4 or 5 months went by after you went up to 1,000 milligrams, and you got checked again 6 months later, and he said, your numbers aren't any better. So now we're going to double the dosage again. So you went from 1,000 to 2,000 milligrams. And 2,000 milligrams of metformin is, generally speaking, is the maximum. I've seen some people even higher than that, but the maximum, generally speaking, is 2,000 milligrams of metformin. So what I want you to get from what I just said was, if you went from 500 milligrams of metformin to 1,000, and then you went to 2,000, it's out of control. You're not getting any better. You're actually getting worse. That's why it keeps raising the dosage. And whatever number you have, if I ask somebody, what's your blood sugar number, and keeping in mind that I already said the number should be 70 to 99, and you're at 120, and you go, oh, my number's at 120. And now I'm going to say to you, well, that's not a real number. And you're going to say, why isn't it? And you say, it's not a real number because you're taking drugs to hold the number down. That means if you stop taking your medication, what's going to happen to that number? And that number, that 120 or 130 or 160, it's going up. It's not coming down. It's going up. So the real number is, what's your number without medication? That's the real thing. And then to make things worse, now you've taken your maximum dosage of metformin, and you go back in 6 months and your doctor says you're still not any better, so we're going to give you this drug called, we generally call them G drugs because they start with the letter G, like glipizide, glimepiride, glyburide. Those are typically one of the drugs you'll take, and that's supposed to help to squeeze the pancreas a little bit more, put a little more pressure on the pancreas and cause it to create more insulin. The problem is, if you keep on squeezing that pancreas to make that happen, pretty soon the insulin isn't being made by the pancreas like it should anymore. So you're taking that drug, now you're taking 2 drugs. And then, let's check you again in 6 months. 6 months goes by, you get back in there, you see the doctor again, does all the tests that he's been doing. And now he says, you know what, I think it's time for us to put you on insulin because your numbers really aren't improving. And at the end of the day, it's like, listen, you should write this down. If you're taking insulin, you're already the sickest of the sick. Like, you can't get any sicker than you are if you're a person taking insulin. And remember when I said earlier that now you're diagnosed, and when you started taking the 500 milligrams, I know I'm jumping around a little bit, but the doctor also said, there's 3 things I want you to do. I want you to take this metformin, and I want you to do 3 things: eat right, exercise, and lose weight. And most of you have tried to lose weight. And I've seen people lose as much as 100 pounds and their numbers haven't really changed. Sure, they fluctuate a little bit, but for the most part, they kind of stay right about the same. So you're like, well, I lost weight. How come I'm not getting better yet? Because weight loss isn't the answer. I've seen plenty of skinny diabetics in my time. And, you would think a person who weighs 120 pounds is no possible way they could be a diabetic. Well, guess what? There is a possible way. There's a lot of skinny diabetics because if your doctor said, I want you to eat right, and they leave you to your own defenses sort of to figure out what to eat. And everybody thinks it's okay to eat fruits and vegetables and just kind of eat less of what I've been eating, right? And the problem is if you eat less of what you've been eating, at the end of the day, you're just going to become a skinnier diabetic. Nothing's really changed. The chemistry is exactly the same. So when your doctor said, listen, if you want to drink soda, I'm okay with you drinking soda. And whether it's your doctor or your nutritionist or dietitian, they all say the same thing. They say everything in moderation and nothing in excess. But the truth is, if you're drinking soda, soda is really bad for you. And most of you are going to say, well, I don't drink soda. I'm okay with that. I think that's good. But you probably drink coffee, and that's bad too. I can answer some of those questions for you later at the end of the class again if we get to that point. But they're saying you could drink soda if you want to. Make sure it's diet soda. So diet soda has aspartame, aspartame, sucralose, a whole bunch of different things, and most of the time it's aspartame. That's really bad for you. So not that you should go back to drinking regular soda. Soda is bad in general. It's an inflammatory drink, right? Just like coffee. Coffee is inflammatory, whether it's caffeinated or not caffeinated, it doesn't matter. They're both bad because they're both inflammatory. And people don't like that because they go, I got to have my coffee. Listen, I mean, if coffee is more important to you than becoming a non or reversing your diabetes, then drink coffee. I mean, there's nothing we can do for you. But if you want to get better, this class is really for a person that really considers health to be their main concern, and they're really concerned about it. Like they're really worried about, if I don't do this, what's going to happen, right? What's going to happen to me? And there's a whole bunch of complications with diabetes that I've found. I see that a lot of people don't even realize. They don't realize that you really could have visual problems. And I don't just mean visual, like blurred vision. I mean, people actually go blind because they have diabetes. Or and most people complain of loss of energy. They complain of things like loss of sexual desire, erectile dysfunction for men, loss of sexual desire for women. Your blood pressure goes up, your cholesterol goes up. And since I said that, often when you start taking that metformin in the beginning, and your doctor said, eat right, exercise, and lose weight, he also said, I'm going to give you a couple other medications for you because these go hand in hand with having diabetes. And one of those things is cholesterol medication. And they call them just in case drugs. I'm going to give you these drugs just in case. Like you don't have a blood pressure or a cholesterol issue at the moment, or you do, and maybe if you do, it's because you're diabetic, or you don't have those problems, and because you're diabetic, now the doctor says, I'm going to give them to you just in case. So I don't know about you, but I turned 67 last year. I haven't had any drugs in my body in more than 47 years, like no aspirin, no Tylenol, no cough syrup, no cholesterol medication, no blood pressure. That's how it's supposed to be. The problem is when the doctor said, eat right, exercise, and lose weight, you don't really know how to go about it. My job is when I work with patients is I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. And when I talk to patients and I ask them, would that be helpful to you? Most people say, if somebody just gave me like an outline, told me exactly what to do, and I could just follow that and it worked, I could do that. And so that's what our goal is. My goal is when I work with somebody, I'm going to tell you exactly what to do. I'm going to hold your hand through the process of beating your diabetic condition and get that anger that you've got, get rid of that anger because I know the frustration you have. I mean, when I see my mom and my dad both going through diabetes, and my mom now, by the way, is 89 years old. She does not have diabetes any longer. She eats the way I tell her to eat. And eating isn't hard at all, but you just got to get rid of the things that you know are bad. So, a lot of times when I do these talks, either if we do them in person or we do them online, I don't have any feedback because you hear me talking and I can't hear you unless you raise your hand or put a question in there. But a lot of times when I do these in person and I go down the line, the front row of people, and I say, what'd you have for breakfast? People say things like, oh, I had biscuits and gravy for breakfast. I'm like, are you serious? Like biscuits and gravy? Do you not know that that's bad for you? And my point is, it's pretty rare that I go through a group of people and they're actually eating well. Like it happens sometimes, but even that person who's eating well still taking a lot of medication, still has diabetes, still going to have all the complications. It's just not getting better. So, my frustration when I deal with people is knowing that when you first went in and got diagnosed, that was about the extent of the care that you've received for the whole time you were diabetic. So even if you've been just recently diagnosed, or if you've been diagnosed for the last 30 years, a person who's been diagnosed for 30 years, with diabetes, they think, this is my life. This I'm stuck with. And I say, listen, you're not stuck with it, but you have to be willing to make changes. So when I talk to people and I say, listen, I know, I have no doubt in my mind that I can help you. I know that we can get you better, but you have to be the person who wants to get better, right? So, if eating cookies at night and having a glass of milk is your thing and you just won't stop that, well, then this isn't for you, because you're more concerned about the satisfaction of what you're eating, drinking now than you are about your health later. But the day it's going to matter is the day you're at your dying bed, in your deathbed, and you're saying to yourself, I wonder if I didn't have diabetes, would I be living longer? And the truth is, you likely would be, because they say that a person who has diabetes will lose 7 to 10 years on their life. That's the truth. So, my job is, what I do with people is we test you thoroughly. So I want to make sure I go over with you like what it is that we do that's different than what you've had done so far. And so the first thing is we test you thoroughly, right? You have to have thorough tests. So blood test isn't enough. I mean, and most blood tests that you've had, they're blood tests that your doctor has, maybe 20 or 30 or less markers in it. Our blood test has got 63 markers in it. That means everything you could possibly find in a blood test is on this blood test. And we have to find whatever's wrong with you. We have to fix those problems. So if you have liver problems or gallbladder issues or problems with your pancreas, like it really isn't producing insulin, or stomach problems, whatever it is, we have to find those problems and fix it. Many of you are having liver problems like fatty liver, or just having, or the enzymes just aren't right anymore. Well, we have to work towards getting that corrected, because if you don't find out what's actually causing your problem and you don't get it fixed, then you can't fix your diabetic problem. And the reality is, and I say this a lot to patients, only 5% of the diabetic population has truly pancreatic problems. 5%. That means 95 times out of 100, the patient I'm dealing with doesn't really have a pancreatic problem, even though your medicine doctor said it's a pancreas and it's not producing the insulin that it should. Well, the thing is, first of all, there's a test that has to be performed. You should write this down. Although, should you go and ask your medicine doctor to do it now? I would think like you should have done it on his own before you ever mention it. The test is called the C-peptide test, C-peptide. And that C-peptide test is the marker, is the gold standard in telling you and letting you know whether or not your pancreas is actually producing insulin or not. And if it's producing insulin, should you be on insulin? And we don't know, because most people say, well, I think they did that test. Or I can tell you that, I talk to probably no less than 10 new diabetic patients every week. So, over the year, that's 40 a month. That's almost 500 people a year that we've just talked to. Probably half of those we actually accepted to our program, but only about 1% of those people actually have the C-peptide test done. It costs about $25-30, but nobody does it. And that's the test that has to be done. It's called the C-peptide test. And you should just be building more and more frustration as we go along, because you realize that, hey, they didn't do this C-peptide test. They just assumed because my numbers are getting worse. Well, the reason your numbers are getting worse is because you're eating, because the way they have you eating, and they haven't tested you thoroughly enough to find out what's actually wrong. If you don't find out what's wrong, you can't fix anything. It's kind of like, holy cow, that makes like so much sense. And I hope it's making sense to you too. So C-peptide has to be done. So what I do with you then is we do the testing, we do the C-peptide test to find out whether your pancreas is producing insulin or not, and then whatever supplements we need to give you while you're in our program to get your liver functioning better or your kidneys working better again, we can do that. And they're called nutraceuticals. You have to be the kind of person who's okay with doing things on a more natural level than taking all these drugs, because drugs are no good for you. That's just how it works. And I'm not saying that every single person that has diabetes, some people are going to have to do that, maybe have to be on drugs. But they're all doing I've not yet met a diabetic person who's doing the right thing in terms of their diet and eating the way they're supposed to. They're just not doing it. So what I do is I tell you exactly what to eat, exactly what not to eat. and then you're doing it, and then I monitor you. I'm going to hold your hand through our program, through this whole process, and make sure that you're getting the results that I say you're going to be getting. And we prove it by retesting you, right? So when you get tested and tested and tested, it's your numbers are going down, 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 and you're taking less and less medication as we go along. And I think that's what everybody really would want. They'd say, like, I don't know, I don't talk to anybody who says to me, I want to take more drugs. Like, nobody says that. They all say, if I could get off these medications, I'd be really happy, but I can't. Or they think they have it under control because they're taking, a couple sticks with the needle, right? You're taking insulin, and they're saying, I got it under control because I'm taking insulin. Listen, and I said this already, if you're taking medication, it's not in control, it's out of control. That's why you're on medication. You're not supposed to be a person that has to do that, but you got to get away from the things that are really bad for you. And your medicine doctor says it's okay to have bread, make sure it's whole wheat. That's wrong. Your doctor says it's okay to have milk, make sure it's 1% or 2%. That's wrong. Your doctor says it's okay to drink coffee, so make sure it's decaffeinated. Wrong, right? And the doctor says it's okay to drink soda, make sure there's same thing with the caffeination, and make sure it's diet. That's wrong. So I just told you 4 things. There's a whole bunch of things that you shouldn't be doing that you are doing. Like, you can't get up for, when I say to patients, what did you have for breakfast? And they say, I didn't have breakfast this morning. I'm like, well, is that good or bad for diabetes? You don't have to be Einstein to realize that's really bad. Like, you have to have enough good fuel in your body. You can't put bad fuel in your body day after day, and expect your body to function well. It just doesn't make sense. It's a dumb idea. Like, it doesn't make sense. So my job is to make sure you get enough good fuel in your body. And the eating part's really easy. But yeah, are you going to get away from cookies and things that are bad for you? Yeah, you are going to get away from those things. If you want to be healthy, you're going to want to do that. But it's not for everybody, because not everybody wants that, and that's okay. I mean, it just is what it is. I mean, I've talked to, when I tell you I talk to 10 people a week, and I only accept about 3 or 4 or 5 of those people every week. That's because the rest of them would rather have coffee. I would rather drink soda, and rather eat cookies, and that's what they'd rather do. And they'd say right now, hey, I'm going to die anyways. Well, it's a pretty bad outlook. But the person who's just saved their life and doesn't have the complications of, which we talked about a little bit, which was possibly going blind, have a big loss of energy. Most people are gaining weight. When the doctor gives you insulin, they should have told you that insulin is a fat storing hormone. So isn't it funny that they didn't do the test to find out whether the pancreas is producing insulin or not anyway, the C-peptide? They didn't even do that. But then they said, I think what's going on is your pancreas isn't working as well. So I think we're going to start you on some insulin. But they should have told you that insulin is going to cause you to gain weight. So first they tell you eat right, exercise, and lose weight. Then they give you insulin, which is actually going to cause you to gain weight. So it's kind of a paradox there. I mean, it's like, it's a bad thing. And if you keep on, injecting insulin into your system, pretty soon your pancreas, if it is producing insulin, and most of the time it is, not always, most of the time, if you keep injecting insulin into your body, then you're going to find that the pancreas is going to stop the pancreas is like a valve. It's like you go outside by your house and you have the little water spigot out there, and you turn the valve to the right and the water turns on, you turn it to the left and it shuts off. Well, it's like kind of like that. And so when you keep injecting insulin into your body, the valve kind of for the pancreas gets turned to the left, and it shuts down a little bit more, a little bit more, a little bit more. And it's just making a little bit of insulin now because you got a whole bunch of insulin being injected. And eventually the pancreas says, well, why do I have to make insulin when we're having an enormous amount of insulin being injected into our system already? So I don't need any more insulin. So it shuts off all the way, right? Well, we didn't even know. And most of the time it was producing some insulin, but because your doctor is injecting, it's going to shut it off. So that's not a good scenario. I hope that makes sense to you. So, yeah, I mean, when I talk to patients, I'm always a little bit concerned because I'm not sure they get the whole idea, the complete understanding of how bad diabetes actually is because of all the drugs they're taking. And then they're I don't want to say they're lied to, but they're kind of misled because your doctor said to you, once you're diabetic, always diabetic. That's simply not true. I mean, diabetes does not have to be part of your life if you don't want it to be, but you have to be willing to make changes. And the truth is, everybody's not willing to make changes. It's just how it is. And I understand that. And I don't fault you for it. We can only help the people who want to be helped. There's a lot of people that want to be helped. Diabetes is a problem where there's now 24 million people walking around that have diabetes that have been diagnosed, and another 20 plus million people that have diabetes that haven't been diagnosed yet. And so our goal, in my area here in, Indiana, I mean, I literally in Fishers, we got about 20, we probably have 20,000 diabetics just in Fishers alone. And truth is, I'll never see 20,000 diabetics for my whole life. But the ones that I do see are going to beat diabetes and get rid of diabetes. We can make that happen. And don't forget, like my dad who died from complications of diabetes, being bilateral kidney failure. I mean, you could also have amputation. You have the other things like cholesterol problems, blood pressure problems, sexual issues. Those are all things that happen, and people just kind of say like, oh, woe is me. This is just what it is, while they're eating a donut for breakfast. But that all can be changed if you're the kind of person who says, health is my main concern, right? And I was talking to my brother the other day, and we were talking about this group of kids down the street from us when we were growing up. There were 7 boys, and all of them, there's only one of the boys that are older than I am right now, and I'm 67. And so they're all younger except for one. And of the 7 boys, 6 of them have all died already. And the oldest one, who's older, he's dead too. One of the younger ones is still alive. And it turns out in their family, and it's not hereditary either. So people think it's hereditary. It's not hereditary, it's habitual. So when you look at a family and a bunch of them have diabetes, you say like, unfortunately, that whole family has diabetes. That's because it's hereditary or it's genetics. It's not hereditary. It's not genetics. It has to do with habits. All of them growing up at the same time in the same household are eating the same things. So if one drinks soda, they all drink soda. One eats this bread, they're all eating that bread because the parents didn't know better, and so they're all suffering from this diabetic condition because of what they've done for their whole life. You can't put, and I said this before, you should write it down. You can't, if you continue to put bad food, bad fuel in your body over and over again, you can't, expecting your body to function well doesn't make sense. And most people say to me, woe is me, why is this happening to me? I always say, like, are you serious? Like, look at your diet, and it's not only your diet. Your diet is a big thing. It's like, without question. But the problem is when you went to your nutritionist or your dietitian, they all said everything in moderation and nothing in excess. Well, that just doesn't fly, because if everything you're eating is bad for you, there's no moderation. And I hope that makes sense to you. So what you have to rephrase that to say everything on occasion, nothing in excess. So on occasion, so it doesn't mean you can never have a banana, not a banana. Banana is okay, but you got to be careful with fructose, too much fruit. It doesn't mean you can never have a cookie or a piece of cake or a pie or soda. It doesn't mean you can never have it again. I always say, hey, listen, how about we get your numbers under control, really, where you can get off of medication and get in and take, start getting your health back, start feeling like you're supposed to feel at your age again. And people think, well, I have time. I can get this figured out myself. I always say, look, you don't have time. Think about how old you are right now and how fast you got how fast you got to that age. I mean, I can tell you, at 67, it's hard for me to believe I'm 67 years old, but here I am. And, in 13 years, I'm going to be 80. And I don't care what you say, 80 is old. No matter what you do, 80 years old is old. But a lot of you aren't going to make it to 80. All those boys from my childhood, there are six of the 7 are dead. The oldest one, who was probably 70, he's dead, and all the rest are younger than me. So the truth is, it's unbelievable. You don't have time. It's like, when I think about that, sometimes I think about like the, when 9/11 occurred, it was already 22 years ago. I mean, how fast has the 22 years gone? And that's how fast your life goes. You don't have time. You have to act on it sooner than later, right? And that's going to be your only chance to actually beat diabetes. So I want you to write this down, that diabetes can be reversed. And by reversal, what I mean is you can get to the point where you're off of most or all of your medication. You can lose weight without exercising, because this is not an exercise program. You can get your energy level back, get your sexual desire back. You can beat cholesterol, get off of that cholesterol medication. You can beat your blood pressure medication. You don't have to be on blood pressure medication most of the time, and we check that. So it's not like I just say, hey, and whatever you do, just because we're saying it's possible, I'm not saying go home and stop taking medication. Don't do that, right? You have to be monitored. You have to be tested. You have to be retested and retested again to make sure this is actually happening. But and the what I love about being about being a doctor that works with diabetic patients, and for those of you that don't know, I'm actually a chiropractor. And most people, when I talk to them, I tell them I'm a chiropractor who works with diabetic patients. It's actually in this area called functional medicine. Most people say, well, what's a chiropractor know about diabetes? Well, the reason I know so much about it is because both of my parents were diabetics, and I told you my dad died at 74 years old because of the complications of diabetes. My mom, who is now 89 years old, she was diagnosed with diabetes in her 60s, like 67, I think it was. And they started her on metformin, they put her on the G drugs, glipizide, glimepiride, glyburide, one of those G drugs, and ultimately wanted to put her on insulin. Well, I got involved when my mom called me and wanted to know, like, why should she take insulin, because the doctors are recommending it. And I was like, man, insulin's really bad for you. When you're taking insulin, you're already what we would call the sickest of the sick. Doesn't mean you can't get better, but your back's against the wall. There's nothing more they can do for you except for give you a stronger dosage, a bigger dosage of insulin. And at some point, it's not going to make any more difference. So, and then you start having amputations. And I know a lot of people now that have lost toes, lost their feet up to their knee and up to their hip already. And then they died. I've seen that more times than I'd like. This is why we do this stuff, is because I've seen it in my household. I've seen it in my cousins and my uncles. And yeah, it doesn't have to be. So my mom, yeah, so they want to give her insulin, and we said to her, let's test you and try to figure out what's wrong with you first. And you have to find out, is it a liver problem? Is it a pancreatic problem? Is it is it a stomach issue? Where are you having problems? Because I said this earlier, 95 times out of 100, it's something other than the pancreas. And once we get her on the right supplements to get her body functioning like it's supposed to, and retested her to make sure that her liver enzymes are working like they should, her pancreas, we did the C-peptide test, and pancreas is working, like it's supposed to. With my mom, it probably took me 18 months to get her figured out. Now we've got to figure it out down to about 6 months. That means, could you imagine 6 months from now, and not even 6 months, we could see major changes in 3 or 4 weeks. But you're not cured in 3 or 4 weeks, but you certainly can see that your numbers really are going down. And we usually do blood tests like every 90 days because that's how long red blood cells live. They live to be 90 to 120 days. So after that, so that's that's because and the red blood cell is where the sugar attaches to. So when you look at a slide, you could see how much. The reason they give you that A1C number, and you should write this down, that A1C number, the range is 4.5 to 5.8. So if you're 6.1, you're diabetic. If you're 5.8, you're at the top end of normal. And if you're not taking drugs, then that's where you're supposed to be. If you're at 5.8 with medication, it's not 5.8. It's not 6.1, it's not 7.2. It's whatever the number is without taking the drugs. And then the number is going to rise. So and this is important for you to grasp, because people will routinely, when I say to them, well, what's your A1C? They're like, oh, my A1C is 5.5. And I go, how much medication are you taking? I'm taking 2,000 milligrams of metformin. I got a G drug, and I'm taking a long-acting and a short-acting insulin. And I go, okay, so if you stop taking those medications, what happens to your A1C? It skyrockets. So the real number is, what is it without medication? That's important. And when you call us, or when we talk to you about your potential to be accepted into our program, we're going to ask you those questions about what your A1C is, what's your blood sugar and A1C without medication. Most of you don't even know. You've been taking medication for so long, you don't even know what it is. But I just want you to understand that with the medication you're taking, your numbers are incorrect. They're not real numbers. They're fake numbers. And I hope I know I'm kind of drilling it home for you, but at the end of the day, it's like, hey, listen, I don't want you to be angry anymore. I want you to be able to say, like, hey, there is hope. It makes sense what he says. At the end of the day, your doctor just says, hey, take these drugs and keep doing what you're doing, try to lose weight. And you've tried that and it didn't work. You tried exercising, didn't work. Right. So all you've done is take it all. Now what goes on is you go to your medicine doctor, and the only thing they say they do to you is give you more drugs until they can't give you any more. And then they say, this is where you're going to be. And eventually we're probably going to have to amputate something. And most of you probably know somebody who has some sort of amputation already. And if you don't, you will at some point. And I know plenty of people that have brought in toes into my office, or just told me, or come in now on crutches with one leg instead of two. I mean, I've seen that more than I care to count at this point. The reality is, it's just, you shouldn't be. So I'm hoping that at the end of the day, you kind of you got a lot out of this talk. I mean, hoping that you just got hope, if nothing else, and realizing that reversing your diabetes is possible. There's two types of people that when we see them, there's either people that reverse their diabetes, which happens to everybody, or there's also people that become non-diabetics. If you're a non-diabetic, you're not taking any more medication. Your numbers are where they're in the ranges they're supposed to be in, but you're eating right. You're doing the things you have to do, and both scenarios do that. Most people who become reverse diabetics means their numbers have improved dramatically. Their medications have dropped pretty dramatically. They're likely still taking some drugs, but they're doing much better than they were before. And that person is a person who likely could become a non-diabetic. You have to keep doing what you're doing. And I get people sometimes, and it's happened to me recently, where a guy said to me, how long do I have to eat this way? And my response to him was, you can stop eating this way anytime you want. You can go back to doing what you were doing before. But if you want to continue being a reverse or a non-diabetic, you shouldn't change anything. Keep doing what you're doing, what's working. If what you're doing is working, why would you change it? So again, it doesn't mean you can never have a piece of cake or drink a soda or a cup of coffee. It just means it can't be part of your diet. It could be on occasion. So, I said this earlier, I keep repeating myself because I know most of you didn't write this down. When your nutritionist said everything in moderation and nothing in excess, that has to be rephrased to everything on occasion and nothing in excess. On occasion, you can do anything, but that's what it has to be. If everything you're eating is bad for you, there is no moderation. That's the problem. So you get up in the morning, you have, Captain Crunch for breakfast, and you have peanut butter and jelly sandwich for lunch, or McDonald's, and dinner you have pasta. You didn't eat anything today that was good for you. It was all bad for you. And that's why you're a diabetic. And then on top of that, you might have a pancreatic problem. You've got a liver issue, likely. You do have excess weight, which doesn't help or hinder your diabetic condition. But obviously, if you're overweight and it's probably not a bad idea to lose some, but don't have the false thinking that because I'm losing weight, I'm going to fix my diabetic condition. That's not true, because you're eating the same thing that you've been eating all along. You're just eating less of it. So eating less of what you've been eating all along just causes you to be a skinnier, a weighing less diabetic. That's all that really happens. So our job is to get you on the track to eating the right things, doing the right stuff. And everything you're eating is all stuff you've eaten your whole life, but you're just going to take out the things that are bad. So, you can still have fish, chicken, turkey, lamb, beef, pork, and shellfish. You can have any of those things. Not always, not all of them in the beginning, but we'll go over that. You're going to be drinking a lot more water than you're probably used to, but your body is made of water by 70%. It's like the planet. It's not made up of coffee or milk or Coca-Cola. It's not made up of that at all. It's made up of water. So you have to put good, clean water in your body. And most people will say to me, "Oh, I understand that. You don't do it, but you realize that you probably should be doing it." That's what's important. So our job is to monitor you, hold your hand, and hold you accountable. I think when I talk to people, and maybe the holding you accountable is probably the most important part of our program, because that's the part that you show me your food log, and I look at it and I go, okay, this is wrong, this is good, and I say, stop doing this, start doing this, and you do it, and guess what happens? Your numbers start getting better. Most people are kind of like, they can't believe how much better they've gotten and how quickly it actually happens. It's interesting. So I've kept you guys now for right about 40, almost 45 minutes. So I don't want to go a whole lot longer, because I think we start losing interest. Somebody's cat's getting kicked, or the dog's barking, or something's happening outside. So what I want to make sure you get is that we're here to help you. There is hope. You can get better. Reversing diabetes is possible, and getting them in the right range without medication happens a lot. But where you're going to get help, the medicine doctors you're seeing, they're putting you in, it's called the drug therapy model. And that means you go in, you tell them your problem, they do your blood sugar, and they find out you're a diabetic, and they put you on insulin. They put you on, not insulin, but they put you on metformin. They might put you on insulin, most of the time not, usually on metformin first, and then they just follow the protocol. And your numbers get worse, they add more drugs. Your numbers get worse again, they add another drug. Your number gets worse, they add insulin. That's the case, but it doesn't have to be. So even though it's frustrating, even though you think it's not possible, it is possible. It does happen. We do it a lot. We do it all the time. I've not had a person that hasn't been able to reverse their diabetes, but I have had people that could have done better. And a great story real fast, and I'll let you guys go. I had a person who owns a company where well, anyways, he owns a company, and he and his wife come in to see me, and I'm talking to him, so I'm talking to you about on day one about how to help him, so on. And he tells me he drinks 4 cups of coffee a day, 2 shots of bourbon before dinner, 2 shots of bourbon after dinner. And I said to him, man, I don't know if this is, this. I said, are you able to stop doing that? And he looked at me and he goes, yeah, I think so. And I said to him, you know what, I'm not. You didn't convince me on that answer. And so I said, listen, why don't you guys talk it over, you and your wife, and I'll come back in the room in a few and see if you've changed your mind about that. And as I'm walking out the room, his wife gets up and follows me out. And she says, please help my husband. I mean, I don't want him to die early. I want to make sure, if anything, I'd like to die before he does. And, and I'll help you help him. And so reluctantly, I accepted their case. So what happened was, as we're going through the program with him, he's now, instead of 4 cups of coffee, 2 shots of bourbon before and 2 shots of bourbon after dinner, he's drinking 2 cups of coffee, 1 shot before bourbon, 1 shot of bourbon before dinner, and 1 shot of bourbon after dinner. So he got about 50% of the results. And at the end, I was like, look, you could have done so much better. I mean, is bourbon and coffee that important to you? And if it is, and it's worth your life, then do what you're doing. And I think he was maybe still, he wasn't like thrilled that his numbers didn't improve more than they did, but he was happy that he knows how to start to reverse them, how to reverse. So reversing it, even if you're doing that and you're half-ass going into it like that, it's still, you still can be helped. But if you're a person who says health is my main concern, you're the person we want to talk to. And our thing at the end of our talk here is that each and every one of you have an opportunity to talk to me, speak to me in person, one-on-one. We can do it via Zoom. We can do it on telephone. It's sort of a get acquainted kind of a call. It takes about 20 or 30 minutes to find out whether or not we can move you on to the next step to where we think we might be able to qualify you as a patient. The reason you don't all qualify is because you don't have all the right answers. Health is not your main concern. You're just trying to find out some more information. You think I talk too fast, or I talk, or whatever, whatever it is, whatever's on your mind. And at that point, you're like, I don't think, I think I got under control because I'm taking these medications. Then I'm not the doctor for you, and that's okay. But we've got a Q&A question button at the bottom. I will answer any question I can for you. If you fill out those questions, if you want to get accepted, not accepted, but considered for that 20 or 30-minute phone call, personal phone call where you're talking to me directly, I want you to raise your hand, and so Audrey can get your, she's got your number ready, but make sure that she gets you on our schedule, and we can set it up so I can actually speak with you independently and help those people that really want to be helped. We'll go through some of these questions here shortly. I guess we're ready for that. I don't know if we're ready for that. Are we ready for that yet, Audrey?
Yes, we are ready for that. I will continue to track also anybody who's interested in chatting. We have a few questions queued up, but this was such a wonderful class. And I know, we went really fast and covered a lot of details. So just as a reminder, I will be sending you information about the additional tests that you really need, that you can ask your doctor for, that help you figure out what's actually going on in your body specifically versus just being put on like the one size fits all program. So we're going to give you a list of the tests. We're also going to give you more information about anti-inflammatory foods. And then that one thing, I just want to reiterate what Dr. James said at the very end here. The one thing that he sees in his patients who are successful is accountability. They're willing to be held accountable. So that's just kind of a summary. You'll get all of that via writing. So the first question that I have for you, Dr. James, is one of our students today said, do I need a prescription to buy testing strips?
Yes. So I see that. Looks like that was Elaine. And so Elaine, no, the answer is no, you don't need a prescription, but testing strips don't test you. Testing comes from the blood work that we do with the 63 markers in it. And once we've accepted you as a patient, we're going to send you to a lab to get the testing done that needs to be done specifically for you and for everybody. And in the beginning, everybody's going to get these 63. And then we have specialty testing like DNA of the stool, where you take a stool sample, send it to a lab to find out if you have an intestinal issues, like is your body able to break down fats and lipids and carbohydrates and proteins like it's supposed to or not. And there's also urinalysis testing. Well, they do that when they do the blood test, they do urinalysis, and we also do hormonal testing. So those are some of the specialty things that your doctor hasn't done. I mean, somebody in here might say like, "Oh, my doctor did some of that," and I've never seen it, but I guess it's possible. But we do hormonal testing. We do that's through saliva. We do DNA of the stool, and then we do the blood work. And so it's not there's no such thing as going and buying testing strips. That a testing strip would tell you one thing, whatever that is. And a lot of times that would be something like pH, probably like if you did a urine test and you test your pH for alkalinity, that's another important thing. We do that also in the blood work, because an alkaline environment is an environment where cancer, sickness, disease, and diabetes probably cannot survive in that environment. So you want to move your body towards alkalinity. So anyways, hope that answered your question. No, we do this. We get to send you out and do the testing, get the testing done for you. Yeah, no, there's no such thing as testing strips.
Betty would like to know, what are your simple daily diet suggestions? You talked a little bit and you explained about how coffee, whether it's caffeinated or not, is inflammatory. So give some more of those like really great, simple daily diet suggestions that anybody with type 2 diabetes could follow and start to improve.
Yeah, so we said, water is 70% of your body is made up of water, just like the planet. 70% of the planet's made of water. So ideally, you want to drink water, and you can't put those powdery things in there to give it a different flavor. Water is your number one thing. If you drink water, you're going to do better. It's that your body's not made up of coffee. It's not made up of milk. It's not made up of soda. It's made up of water. So that would be one thing. And then just the obvious things. I mean, right now, you're all diabetics. So the reality is, at the end of the day, is like, I can't, our biscuits and do I need to tell you that biscuits and gravy aren't even good for you? Like most people just I say this in a group setting where we're in person. Everybody in the class just starts laughing because they're like, who does that? But that happens to be an Indiana thing. People actually do that. So yeah, that's just not a good idea. So, I said things like bread are bad for you. Your doctor says you can have bread, make sure it's whole wheat. Whole wheat bread doesn't matter if it's whole wheat or what, bread's bad for you. And most people know, oh, I shouldn't be eating a lot of bread. I shouldn't eat cake. I shouldn't be eating on a regular basis. On occasion, you can get away with it. But I always say, hey, how about we get your numbers under control first? And once we get your numbers under control, then we can, then not in moderation, on occasion, you could have a piece of cake. On occasion, you could have some bread. When you go out to dinner and special, then you can have bread that night. But let's not make it like a common thing that we're doing. Does that make sense?
Yeah, I think that makes great sense. So just across the board, more water in general. Don't put powders or flavorings or additives in it. Do, as a rule of thumb, try to live with just no bread, except for the very special occasions. And then the obvious things: no cake, no desserts, no sugar. If you take those few suggestions and put them into action today, and you're really serious about it, I think you'll see some very positive changes. I had a couple of questions come in privately, and so I'm not going to share who asked these questions, but the first question was, is your program covered by insurance?
Yeah, that's a question that people ask all the time. And so what we say is, we will do a complimentary check for you. So, but you first have to get accepted in the program in the first place. So at the end of the day, it's like insurance. There may be some coverage, it may not. I don't know. We'll be happy to do a complimentary check on you before you even get to that point. You have to be accepted into the program. So once you get accepted in the program, we'll bend over backwards and do everything we can to figure out whether or not insurance covers or not, or do everything we can to make it so that it's affordable to you.
So yeah, anybody can have a consultation call with Dr. James, and for 20 to 30 minutes, he'll chat with you about your life and your situation, and he'll just give you some advice. So his passion, my passion, everybody's passion at Geist Integrated Health is to talk to as many people as possible and try to give them the information that they need. So anybody can talk to him. There's no obligation. He just wants to hear about like what's going on in your life, and he can give you the advice from there. So but if you do decide you want help and you want to go beyond that, there's a lot more it's like Dr. James said, if you're the kind of person who's like, can somebody just tell me what to do, please? That's where we can help you. Another question that came in privately is, how long is your program?
So typically our program is 6 months. So like I said, with my mom, it took me about 18 months to get it figured out. So we had to do special testing, then that didn't help us so much, and did this, and that didn't work. Then we did this. Oh, this worked out. So by the time it was all done, my mom became a reverse. She became a non-diabetic in 18 months. Now we can get it done in 6 months. And you can see great results in as little as 3 or 4 weeks. It's because every day you're checking your blood sugar. Every day you're eating the way you're supposed to be eating. So eventually your numbers have to, your numbers, it's impossible that your numbers wouldn't improve. They have to improve. And at the end of the day, you have to get off. If you're taking insulin, you can't stay on insulin because you're going to go into hypoglycemia on a regular basis. Nobody likes hypoglycemia, low blood sugar. So the reality is it has to happen. So yeah, yeah, that's it.
So 2 more questions came in. I'm going to ask the private one first, and then I'm going to ask the public one that Betty just asked. The private one, oh, hang on, let me just double check. Yeah, okay. Actually, I'm going to skip to Betty's. Betty wants to know, what about protein shakes in general? Are those okay? Are those acceptable? And by the way, we know we're coming up on our hour. So if you need to hop off, you can hop off. You're going to get your email with kind of the wrap up of all of this so that you can study the information and retain it. But if you want to stay on for Q&A, we can stay on for a little bit longer. So that being said, Dr. James, what do you think about protein shakes?
You always got to worry about. I mean, protein shakes in general, they're not going to help diabetics like at all. I mean, it's, if you think you need more protein, you got to make sure it's a clean protein powder first of all. And most of them have aspartame, aspartame, sucralose, erythritol, one of those sugars in there, even though they say it's sugar free. And everything says diet, light, sugar free, no sugar added. Those are all bad for you. So I kind of frown on the protein shakes, and I don't think in general the average person who's diabetic, there's a lot more they need to worry about than protein shakes. They're going to be concerned about what they're putting in their system, and adding protein is not going to help.
And I believe I've heard you say before, in terms of diabetics getting protein, the best source of that anyway is from meat. Is that correct?
Yeah. So, and so that's the thing. It's like when we talk about, people will say, what can I eat? In the beginning, ultimately you can have fish, chicken, turkey, lamb, beef, pork, and shellfish are all things that you could eat. And if you and things you don't like to eat, you just don't eat. So if you don't like shellfish, don't eat shellfish. If you don't like beef, don't eat beef. But when if your doctor said to you, or your dietitian said you don't eat too much red meat, listen, I've done this for a long time. Red meat's fine for you. When it comes to diabetes, red meat's fine. In the beginning, we have you eating a lot more fish than you would normally do, and unless you're a person who doesn't eat meat, well then we have to change our strategy a little bit. But the whole thing is we're going to give you a whole new eating strategy so that you're getting the results. And the whole thing at the end of the day is like, listen, I need to prove to you that you're getting the results that we say you're going to be getting. And in order to prove it, we retest you. That means the 63 markers that we did in the blood test initially, we do again in 3 months, 90 days, because that's how long the red blood cells live. And 90 days later, now coming toward the end of our 6-month program, we're gonna do that blood test again to show you that it's actually happening. You'll see it in 3 months. You'll see it in 3 weeks probably, but you're not cured in 3 weeks. It literally takes some time. But the truth is, it's very easily monitored the whole way through. If you're checking your blood sugars every day and your numbers are 120 and now they're 100, well, you've improved, and you're consistently seeing numbers that keep getting better and better and better. Well, yeah, I don't know. The proof is in the pudding. You're doing the work and you're seeing it happen. It's got to be. It's always work. I've never seen it not work.
Excellent answer. I have a question about insulin resistance. Mike asks, what about insulin resistance? If you're insulin resistant, doesn't that mean insulin won't work? More and more insulin will just fail or cause more problems. So that sounds like he's kind of calling back to something you talked about earlier in the class. So speak a little bit more on insulin resistance.
Yeah, that's where most people actually are. Most people most patients aren't the patients that are not producing insulin. Most of them are insulin resistant. And that's, Mike is exactly right. It's like, look, it means if you're injecting more insulin to a body that's already insulin resistant, you're going to cause more problems. And that happens like a lot. It's not like one every 10 or 12, 20 people. It's like, it happens all. That's a majority of the diabetic population are insulin resistance. And if they've heard that from their doctor, then the doctor gives them insulin. So then you go like, well, if I'm insulin resistant, you're right. Why would I need it? The problem is that's the care you're getting, and you're going to do it because you don't know what else to do, but you can be helped.
Yes, and just speaking on that, a follow-up question. So can insulin resistance be reversed?
Well, yes, insulin resistance can be reversed. And of course, what we do is now we make sure we do the C-peptide test to find out whether or not the pancreas is actually producing insulin in the first place. So even though you're in insulin resistance, doesn't mean that it can't be fixed. It just means that that's just where the majority of the population is when it comes to insulin. They're really in insulin resistance. And yeah, once you stop injecting so much insulin and get your body functioning normal again. So whether it's, again, what other parts of your body aren't functioning properly, because everything in your body has to work in harmony. And probably most of you already know that, even though we haven't actually said it. You probably know that, like, everything kind of works together. Like it's just how it is. So so our job is to kind of get your body functioning back in harmony again, get it working like it's supposed to work, get you off as much insulin as possible, which happens all the time. I mean, I can't remember the last time I had a person who couldn't get off of insulin. So if you have a desire to stop taking insulin, I mean, you got to go through the process, and we got to make it happen, and we got to be able to prove that it's actually working that way. But if you have that desire, then just keep in mind that, listen, you can do it. It's doable.
Absolutely. It really is. That's the greatest message that we have at Geist Integrated Health, is that it is doable. You can get better. You can feel better. And so I want to wrap up with a very frequently asked question. Just having worked together for about 2 years now, the main thing that I want to say to people is, one of our most frequently asked questions is, will you take me off medication? And I can answer that, and then I'll have Dr. James speak to it, and then we'll wrap up. We never take you off of your medications. That's not what we do. We work with you, the testing, the nutrition, the helping you become educated, understand how diabetes works, but also how your body specifically works. And then what happens is, when we start seeing changes in you, as you go back to your family doctor, your medicine doctor, they will take you off of your medication, reduce your medications, things like that. So we will never tell you, stop taking this, stop taking that. That is up to your family doctor. So Dr. James, speak a little bit to that, and then we will wrap up for the day. And if anyone has any questions, I'm going to put my email and my phone number in here. Again, you will hear from us via email. We'll have follow-ups, but please don't hesitate to reach out if you just want to do that 20-30 minute call and just talk to Dr. James about your life and your condition. So Dr. James, speak to medication as we wrap up here.
Yeah, so people they do ask me that question a lot. And so there's a couple of ways to look at it. One, as you're improving, the truth is you're going to have to start reducing medication. And some of you don't have this sort of relationship with your medicine doctor where you can just call him up on the phone and say, hey, can I stop taking my insulin? Or because he's going to say no and all that. Or you're afraid of him. You're just afraid to do it. So, sometimes a person comes in, we just go, look, what I say to him is, I can't take you off any medication I didn't actually put you on, but I can tell you what I would do in your scenario. And sometimes it means, like, the patient goes, well, I don't have a meeting with my doctor for 3 more months. What am I going to do? And I go, well, then this is do the obvious thing. And the obvious thing is, you have to be okay with realizing and you monitor it, and you might have to get off that insulin, or you might have to get off that metformin to whatever degree, because if you don't, you're going to be in hypoglycemia. And that's a lot worse than taking medication. If your numbers are being monitored, then you realize that you go to see your doctor, he's going to take you off of it anyways, because your numbers have decreased so much. So some of it's kind of a common sense. Some people say to me, I'm going to see my doctor in a week. I go, well, then wait for a week, and when you talk to him, he's going to take you off some of the medication, because it's inevitable. It has to happen. So make sure you raise your hand if you are interested in having our personal phone call. Audrey's going to get you on the schedule to make that happen. If you need to reschedule, we do allow you to do that, but only one time. I have too many people I'm talking to have somebody reschedule and schedule and reschedule and reschedule. So you get on the schedule, that's your time. If make it work, it helps us quite a bit, and it makes it more efficient for me and for you. If you do need to reschedule, we only allow you to reschedule one time. We just don't have the ability to keep moving people down the schedule forever. So anyways, if you're serious and health is your main concern, make sure you get it on a schedule for that phone call. I hope this is helpful for you. I hope you wrote some things down. We're going to be sending you some information as well. If later comes and you decided that you wanted to talk to us, we can get you on the schedule then, and Audrey will help you with that. You should probably have her phone number and her contact information, so that's going to be helpful for you. And I'm going to sign off. I hope this was great for you, and we'll see you guys soon.